Hello everybody, welcome to the special late edition of the Atheist Experience. Our regularly scheduled time was preempted, so they bumped us to 8 o'clock at night. Thanks to all of you who stayed up and joined us, and those of you who are watching live over Ustream. This is probably going to happen once a month or so. We're not completely sure yet. Today is Sunday, March 21st, 2010. I'm Matt Dillahunty, and joining me this week, Jen Peeples. And I'll get our announcements out of the way fairly quickly because I didn't even take notes on them. As I mentioned, this is a live public access television program sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, beginning around 11:30. For more information about the ACA, you can visit www.atheist-community.org, and there you'll find a frequently asked questions page, email links, information about upcoming events, notes for the from the board meetings, that take place on the second Sunday of the month at Romeo's after the regular brunch. The only week of the month that we're not at Romeo's is the first Sunday when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. Lectures begin around 12:15. And normally after this show's over, we get together and go to dinner at Threadgill's, but we're not doing that today. We ate before the show started since we're starting late. So for those of you watching, you could still go down there, but we're not actually going to be there. We ate before the show. In addition, you can find more information about the things that the ACA is involved with at the website, www.atheist-community.org. If you don't get through on the telephone today, or you don't want to get through on the telephone today, you can email tv@atheist-community.org, and that goes to myself, most of the co-hosts, and some of the people behind the scenes as well. We cannot possibly answer all the email that comes in. I think I'm 80 some odd behind at the moment because I've been working on other things. We do read all of them. If you want to make sure that your email makes it through the spam filters, please include either AETV or NPR in the subject line, and that should make it through the spam filters. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Non-Prophets. It's hosted by Dennis Lubay, features Russell Glasser, myself, and others on occasion. You can go find out more information. Actually, that website address is wrong. It's www.nonprofitsradio without the hyphen. It's PROPHETS.com. Nonprofitsradio.com. We'll be live again next Saturday, assuming I survive my trip. Quick notes, I'll be leaving Austin on Tuesday morning to fly to Washington State. Wednesday evening, I'll be speaking at Washington State University Pullman on the superiority of secular morality, and then coming back Thursday evening, going to work Friday, then doing Nonprofits Saturday, and I don't even know if I'm on the show next Sunday. It may be Russell's week. I'm not, actually, no. Russell's normally on a week we don't do Nonprofits. Yeah. So then I'll be back for the show Sunday. Russell Glasser and I will be heading to Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois, April 9th and 10th for a 2-day atheist extravaganza, and I'll be at UT. That's not a public event. UT on April 21st, and then April 22nd, I'm going to be doing a Skype call with CFI Toronto. So if you're in any of those areas or part of any of those groups and want to participate, please seek them out, or you can drop me an email, although right now it's unlikely that I'll get around to actually answering it. Did I miss any of the announcements?
I don't think so.
I'll assume I didn't. Jen, you've got a news bit.
I do.
That you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of email from people about the State Board of Education here in Texas, which is, for those of you who have not been paying attention, our State Board of Education can really bring the crazy. And Cynthia Dunbar, the SBOE member here, she's
outgoing.
Outgoing, but she's still going to be around for a few more months. She was one of those who's instrumental in removing Thomas Jefferson from the world history curriculum. And she claimed that the reason she did this was because his inclusion wasn't germane, as she put it, even though Thomas Jefferson's writings had a lot of influence on a lot of other Enlightenment ideas out there. So anyway, of course, the truth has a way of getting out, and I've got a news release here from the Texas Freedom Network, and if those of you who are not familiar with Texas Freedom Network, that's an outstanding organization. They are really a very strong proponent of accurate science education, accurate history standards, accurate sex education. They do a great service to the education community here in Texas. And if you want to support their efforts, please go to www.tfn.org and show them some love. Anyway, they have this insider brief where they were talking about Ed Brayton from Dispatches from the Culture Wars notes that Dunbar is scheduled to appear at a rally that was organized by Janet Porter. Janet Porter is the founder of Faith to Action, which is an ultra-right-wing fringe religious group. And this rally is entitled May Day 2010, A Cry to God for a Nation in Distress. And according to Faith to Action, Dunbar is going to come to May Day and repent for how we've taught our children lies, not only in revisionist history, but also evolution. How we've kicked God out of school. She will repent on behalf of the education system, and she's also going to welcome God back in. So.
Well, good for her.
I know. Cynthia, if you're listening, please don't repent on my behalf.
Yeah, if you want to actually repent, we can gather the school children of the state of Texas and the rest of the nation together in a video conference, and you can apologize to the people that you've actually harmed.
Yes. Especially all of the young people who have experienced STDs and unplanned pregnancy as a result of your nonsense, abstinence-only, fact-free sex education in Texas. So
there are groups around the nation that are doing the only thing they can. Somebody emailed to say, look, why aren't you guys doing more? What can you do? And the quick answer is this. While the ACA is a visible organization, there's limits as to what we can do. First of all, nothing they've done is against the law. These are the elected representatives that are on the State Board of Education. They can destroy it, and the only thing that they have to worry about is whether or not they get reelected. Fortunately, Dunbar didn't run for reelection. McElroy lost his bid in the primary, and there are people actually challenging them. And the question was posed, well, can't you go to the school book manufacturers and say, we'd like you to correct these mistakes? Well, yeah, you could. It won't do any good because they're going to manufacture school books that they can sell based on the standards that the state has set. The good news is, having worked for one of the publishers before, and I don't have any special insider information or specifics on what the process is, I do know that they publish special editions of books. They publish inserts for states that have different standards. And if you get together in your state with your school boards and say, we need to, as a collective, go to these publishers and say, we won't accept books that were modified to conform to Texas standards. We would like you to publish different books that conform to, real responsible education standards. That's about the most you can do. And I know that there are groups who are going after their school boards and grassroots groups that are saying, we're not going to take this crap from Texas anymore. And good for them, because I'm stuck. Apart from railing about it on the show, and on both shows, and directing people to the one organization that is doing a stellar job in keeping the public aware and doing whatever they can to combat this, and that's the Texas Freedom Network. You can go to, is it tfn.org?
tfn.org,
And
yes.
the TFN Insider is their blog, where I think I posted 4 or 5 different links to their blog in the last couple of weeks while these textbook meetings were going on.
Yep.
So what did you want to talk about this evening?
Oh, well, today's topic is faking it. And
that's why we did the show later in the day.
yeah, there you go. Actually, it's about a paper that was just published. Daniel Dennett and Linda Lascola published a paper called Preachers Who Are Not Believers. And this is available online. I'll actually post to the blog later on. I'll give you a link to where you can find this, because you can download this paper for yourself and read it. But it was very interesting. I read the paper. It's about 28 pages long. I wanted to go through this because it's very, very interesting. It's a small sample, but they looked at, they talked to 5 currently active ministers. There was one guy who's a Methodist, another guy who's in the United Church of Christ, a Presbyterian, one guy who's with Church of Christ, not to be confused with UCC because they're totally different doctrines here, and then finally a Southern Baptist. So they had actually 3 liberals and 2 literalists on this. And again, these guys are all unbelievers here. And it was really interesting. And as I went through it, I kind of pulled out some information about these guys that I thought people would find interesting. And first of all was the reasons why they went into the ministry. And it comes down to there were emotional reasons for some of them. For example, a couple of them, in one case, he turned to religion to deal with a traumatic event. In one case, it was the death of a friend, and in another case, it was an abusive home life as he was growing up. Some of them cited love and acceptance by the church community as a reason for going into ministry. Others, they experienced childhood indoctrination in a specific religion, and that combined with some positive influences with the church as a child prompted them to go into the ministry. Almost all of them expressed a desire to help people, so this was a strong selling point. And then, of course, there were a couple of them that just had some intellectual curiosity. They had a love of learning, and there was something appealing about discussing these deep philosophical questions that they got to discuss in seminary. And then, of course, in one case, it was a desire to avoid the draft, because if you went to seminary, you didn't get drafted for the Korean War. So, but hey, it's honest.
It's funny how losing religion makes people a little more honest.
Yeah.
Just saying.
And so those were some of the reasons for going into the ministry. And then what was really interesting was why they lost their belief in God. And for most of them, they cited their seminary education. And in fact, I have a quote here that, let me see if I can find it quickly here. It boils down to, I don't think I can find it fast enough, but essentially the guy says, you can't go through seminary and come out a believer because they're exposed to higher criticism while they're in seminary. And that's a very different thing than the devotional instruction that you get in Sunday school. They find out that the Bible's not all black and white. They learn about the history of how it was compiled and everything. And as a result, it becomes really hard to sustain a literal belief that this is somehow the Word of God.
Yeah, I would imagine to some degree it's going to depend on which seminary you go to, because some are more liberal than others. But by and large, even in some of the more conservative cemeteries, might as well be. They're killing them off, or they're burying people. In some of the more conservative seminaries, they're still going to go through a period of teaching them about biblical criticism, about textual criticism, and they may do it in these are the claims and things that you'll hear, and these are the responses that you need to be ready to give. Whereas a more liberal seminary may just provide the factual information. And I enjoyed reading, I think it was the first one that talked about this, about watching people struggle with this, that there was a significant portion of the class who from the very beginning were fighting with the instructor tooth and nail, because he was telling them that the things that they believed were literally true aren't literally true, that there was not actually an Adam and Eve.
Well, when I was reading this, one of the things that kind of struck me was how similar these guys' experiences were to what Bart Ehrman described when he went through Princeton. You know, because he came from, I think it was Moody Bible Institute or something like that, which was a very conservative.
Was he Moody too?
I think so. I think he came from Moody. And so, of course, that's, the literalist camp, and he was very conservative. Gets to Princeton and is exposed for the first time to this higher criticism, and it just kind of blew the doors off of his views on the Bible and everything.
Yeah, I just did it without actually going to seminary.
Yeah. Well, and that
It's
gets
the
down
exact
to
same process.
and that gets down to, one of the other guys, the Southern Baptist, as a matter of fact. He read the Bible with the goal of strengthening his faith, and I read that and I thought, where have we heard that before? Because that's how Matt became an atheist.
Yeah, I actually haven't finished reading the study yet, so when I read the Southern Baptist guy's story, I'm wondering how many similarities there are.
Yeah. And then, of course, most of them describe this sort of evolutionary shift in their thinking as they kind of gradually rejected their belief in the central tenets of Christianity. And then finally, they just rejected belief in God altogether. And there's one guy that's sort of waffling around with a kind of pantheistic view on things. But it's sort of just sexed up atheism, as I think Dawkins would call it. And then, of course, the interesting thing is once they've rejected the belief, why would you stay in doing something after you don't believe in it anymore? And it's important to note that none of these guys are out as atheists to their congregations. And every one of them expressed how lonely they feel as a result of this. And that's kind of interesting when you consider the next thing in the list of why they stay. And they cited a sense of community, that they have this this group of friends in the church, and most of them talk about how they don't have any friends or resources outside of their church community. So it's interesting that they stay for the community, but they don't really feel like they're part of that community anymore. All of them expressed some fears about how it will affect their relationships with their family, their friends, their spouse, because in a lot of cases their spouses don't know that they're atheists. They're kind of strongly bound to their identities as ministers as well, and so this is a huge part of who they are, how they think of themselves. They all like helping people, and I think that that's something that they don't want to give up. And finally, of course, they need the job, and they'd suffer financially if they were forced out of the ministry. That's kind of an interesting predicament, because it's almost like the church in many ways has bound them into this service, because ministers aren't paid a lot of money unless you're a televangelist, and none of these guys are. So it's not like they're rolling in cash, and so that their resources are limited, and they have families to take care of. So they can't just stop what they're doing and go do something else, because they aren't really trained for anything else.
It seems to me that one of the things that the world could really benefit from, and I see organizations like this starting more and more often, is I know there are some atheist philanthropists who have been donating to organizations and helping to promote the various groups, and some of them have started groups to help people, recovering religionists. Mm-hmm. And it would be nice if some of those groups had the ability to take pastors who feel stuck in their organizations because they have no other skill set, because they don't know what else they can do. They want to help people. They don't necessarily know how they can help people or what they need to do it. And they don't have an organization that would actually support them. Mm-hmm. We could build a support network that offers these guys a place where they can come and use whatever expertise they do have in counseling. I have it hard to believe that you could be a minister for that many years and not have some skills at counseling. You may need to modify, how you go about it and what the process is, because you can no longer just say, well, let's pray about it, which was, to me, is about the weakest form of counseling you could possibly do. But to build a network for these people so that not only are you helping the parishioners themselves who are coming out and wandering out into a world that seems scary and foreign, but now you've developed a mechanism that will allow the ministers who are leaving as well or would like to leave to help facilitate that. Yeah.
And it's interesting because we get down to how they rationalize their decision to not just up and leave. I mean, the financial thing is huge, but there's a couple of other things that they say that's sort of like, hey, here's some good things I can do while I'm still doing this job that I don't believe in anymore. And the interesting thing is Jack, the Southern Baptist minister, he's made a decision. He's leaving as soon as he's financially, he's got another means of supporting his family. He's going to leave. So he doesn't want to be a liberal minister or go somewhere else and do this anymore. He's done.
Yeah, I think there are some good things that some of these people can do while they're still in their position. It's funny. I'm going to call this a good thing, even though I'm generally opposed to it. But they are in a position where they can soften the edges of.
And that's one of the things that they talk about in here, that they stay so they can liberalize their church. At least the liberals do. Yeah,
and while I'll admit all day long I'm happier to live in a society with liberal theists than I am the literal fundamentalist theists. Mm-hmm. I think that it's a bit dishonest to go about doing it that way. I mean, I realize they're probably giving these people mm-hmm. most of their honest thought. It's the the leading the cow away mm-hmm. slowly type thing. But I'm going to take a much more straightforward approach. I know that comes as a shock to everybody watching the show, but when I got to the point where it was clear I could no longer believe, for much the same reasons that these guys did, it wasn't a moment where I just said, okay, religion's now irrelevant, I'm going to go on about my life. It was, wow, I've been duped and did most of the duping myself, to myself, for many years. Let's get this information out to other people so that they can stop being duped. Yeah.
So, that's one of the things that they say they're trying to do is, push their parishioners toward more liberal, compassionate, rational, and tolerant beliefs. And some of them actually express this belief in belief, and we see this in our email a lot. They believe that faith has value to some people, and they don't want to take that away. And so I have a couple of problems with these rationalizations. I know, shocking. And the first one is sort of like a personal one for the preachers themselves. They all talked about how lonely they feel. And in my view, they're squandering the one and only life they're sure to have in the service of a lie.
Yeah.
And they know this. And even worse, they're leading other people in service of that lie. Because by pretending to believe, they rob their parishioners an opportunity for growth. How many of their parishioners have similar doubts? How many of them would make that journey to reason and evidence if they knew their preacher was an atheist?
Yeah. And this is exactly why I kind of hedged what I was saying before. Yeah. I think they can do some good there. The question is it outweighed by the potential harm?
Yeah.
How are each one of you going to feel 20 years from now when you find out that a handful of kids that you helped teach while you knew you were lying grow up to become ministers and keep spreading the lie? Or perhaps, I'm not sure which is worse, for them to grow up and become ministers and continue to spread the lie, or for them to grow up and become ministers and get stuck exactly the way you were, to where now they're a miserable wretch who is leading other people to potentially have to do. You've got to break the cycle. I'm sure there's I'm sure there are UU churches that would be happy to have you at a minimum. If you can't do anything else, you can find a Unitarian Universalist church that would probably take you.
Well, yeah, and if our email is any indication, you guys have lots of parishioners out there who have similar doubts, and in a lot of cases, it's almost heartbreaking getting some of these emails from people who are terrified that they're going to hell. So, I mean, if nothing else, coming out as an atheist and telling them they have nothing to fear from hell would be a huge service to a lot of your parishioners. But moving on, I think that this kind of points the way to some things that we in the atheist community, not just the Atheist Community of Austin, but the wider atheist community, there's some things that we can do to help. Kind of like what Matt was saying here. We can provide a safe community, a community that's safe for people to come in and who are trying to escape religion. This is a safe place to come and express your doubts about your religion, because not only are we not put off by talking about these things, many of us have made that same journey. So we can help, and we can help if only to lend a sympathetic ear.
Yeah, to the ministers, I doubt nobody thinks for a second that these are the only 5.
Oh, no.
It's not even the only 5 that were considered for this study. To the ministers out there who are in this position, I appreciate the fact that you're in a really difficult spot, that perhaps you feel alone, you have no idea what your options are, you're not sure what you'll do, you're afraid of the changes, you're afraid of coming out to your family. I think I'd point out that not only are you continuing to do harm out of fear, but your parishioners are emailing us when you could be helping them. Your parishioners, in their doubts, they don't want, when Christians have doubts, some of them are going to go to their pastor, and when they do, what are they looking for? They're looking for reassurance. But when those same individuals come and email and call in and talk to atheists, they're not looking for reassurance anymore. They're looking to have their beliefs challenged. They're looking to get information that is not necessarily consistent with what they already believe, so that they can make a better determination. Now, they may walk away from a discussion with one of us further convinced that their religion is true and accurate. And I've said before, I'm fine with that. Reasonably speaking, if you come away after a discussion with me and your faith is strengthened, okay, you were probably a lost cause in the first place. Because I fail to see how, when I was presented with the information, it took a while to tear through the barriers that religion had built up in my own mind. And so I can understand that everybody's not just going to, oh yeah, hey, I just had an argument with this atheist guy, and now I don't believe anymore. That just doesn't happen. It is a lengthy process, and I get email constantly from people who are like, yeah, I got a clip of your show on YouTube, and then I watched a few more, and then I watched a few episodes, and I exchanged some emails with you under a different name a while back, and now I'm emailing to tell you, thank you, because your guys' show has really been, beneficial in helping me escape from religion, and I have a better understanding of things now. So I don't have any delusions about it happening instantly. But what I am concerned about is that you're in a position where you've stopped believing and you could help the other people. And to me, it is selfish and hypocritical to not do so in order to keep yourself safe and comfortable. It's the same fear tool that religion has used to manipulate people forever, only you are doing it to yourself. You are giving in and allowing this fear of the unknown, fear of being alone. Maybe it's just a matter of different character, because I came to a decision really very early once I started falling away from my religious beliefs. I would rather be alone and not believe lies than to be surrounded by people who believe lies and be fed platitudes all the time. I would rather not have my family talk to me if that was going to be the result. It's not. I would rather lose my entire base of so-called friends, because to me, anybody who's going to drop you as a friend just because your beliefs are different, probably not a friend in the first place.
Yeah. That's.
I was fine with it.
If someone decides that they're not going to be your friend because you're an atheist, they didn't like you anyway. Your atheism is just the excuse they're using now to not talk to you anymore.
Yeah, it may be also be the case that they actually do still like you, but they've bought into a religious idea that says they're not allowed to be your friends anymore. How many emails do we get from people who are in relationships wondering what they need to do now that they've stopped believing and their spouse hasn't?
Yeah, or they're engaged to marry somebody who's a theist and they're an atheist, and now she's coming, it's always a guy engaged to a woman, and she's the theist, and she comes back and says, oh, I can't be unequally yoked.
Yeah.
And, my advice, if you're in a situation like that, if she can't, come to reason, then get
Run.
out while you can.
Yeah.
Leave. You cannot do that.
If you can't have a rational, equitable conversation and come to some agreement before you get married, please don't get married.
Yeah.
That's a mistake of just monumental proportions.
Yes. And please don't have children.
Yes. Because that's going to make things a lot more difficult. Anyway, let's get to callers, because there's
Absolutely,
people who agreed to stay up late with us. You're up late with the Atheists. We've got Kim in Los Angeles.
Hi, hello?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, how are you? I wasn't expecting you guys to come in so briefly.
I can put you on hold and bring you back in a minute.
No, I'm ready now.
Yeah, I thought
Okay.
so. What do you got?
Well, I spoke with a gentleman that had me on hold, and I told him that I'm 37 years old, and I started questioning God when I was about 13 in the maybe mid-'80s. I was one of those kids that would come home and my stepfather would, whack me or hit me for small or little of nothing. And I remember praying so hard, asking God to make him stop, or why is he doing this to me? And it just seemed like the more I prayed, the more, aggressive the abuse became. And got to the point where I felt like I wanted to commit suicide and just all that. And I just always felt like a weirdo, different, like no one could understand me. And I started out a good person with a good heart wanting to change the world. And then I saw that, majority of people, they come at you with saying that, oh, you just got to let go and let God. I hear that a lot in my race. And it just starts to really irritate me to hear that, because it's like they're just dismissing the whole situation and just putting that in there to make themselves feel like they said something special,
Yeah, it's the exact same platitudes that I was talking about a minute ago. I hated him when I was a believer. I hate him twice as much now.
And if you think about it, I don't know from you guys' experience, but for me, it seems like the more closer that I supposedly got to God, the more things came against me, the more tests, the more problems, the more letdowns. And I feel like if God really cared about people the way that is said in the Bible or whatever, why would he allow this other force to play games? It's like a monopoly. Like, okay, you want me, then you got to go through this. That's not lovable. That's not a good... To me, that makes me wonder, what is this all about,
Well, I think that one of the issues with this whole platitude of, this let go, let God thing is that it encourages this kind of passivity about your situation.
Yeah.
It encourages you to stop trying to change it, because the idea is that, the supernatural entity who loves you will just rescue you.
And what about, like, when you're born, you start out genuinely an innocent person. You have no judgmentalness about you or whatever, and then you grow up and other human beings contaminate your thinking, and then for that you get punished and you go to hell. I just don't understand that.
Yeah.
Well, depending on what doctrine you bought into, you probably weren't viewed as being born innocent. The doctrine of original sin is such that, obviously from a secular point of view, your kid's starting off innocent and then people are polluting their mind, but from from many Christian doctrines that involve original sin, the child is starting off with a black slate, actually. I'd like to go back for a second to something you mentioned before about how it seemed that the closer you got with God, the worse things became. And I like the fact that you recognized that and saw a problem in it, because what happens so many times is people will then dig through and find Bible verses and supported by ministers who will say, that's the devil coming after you because he doesn't want you to have a good relationship with God.
Exactly.
And you caught on to the fact that even if that was true, why would God permit that to somebody who clearly loved and wanted to do what they were supposed to do?
Because to me, it's an unfair fight.
It's an absurd thing. It breeds a persecution complex amongst believers. And I've seen a number of occasions. I was actually out one day, I won't say where for fear that these people might recognize, but I overheard a conversation from this individual behind me who was obnoxious and talking loud, and they were going on and on about, did this with the church and that with the church, and oh, you should have seen it, and And the devil has just been putting so many challenges in my path. Every time I do something right for God, the devil comes back to smack me down. And I'm thinking, maybe you're just an asshole, and that's what happens because you're an extremely annoying individual.
Maybe you wanted to smack him down, right?
Yeah, I was like, I'm sitting here trying to enjoy myself, and I can't even think because you're cackling behind me.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe
that's
if
what
you...
I mean. Yeah, they're just, no offense, but they are really obnoxious. I was just going to the store talking about the economy and how, it's hard to get a job. I experienced New Orleans. I wasn't there during Hurricane Katrina, but I lived out there after post-Katrina, and it was a big mess then. And the lady's like, oh, you just got to put it in God's hands. And I feel like people need to not do that because not a lot of people want to hear that. I know that my experience with God, I'm starting to be very angry with him. And I don't even know what to call myself. I'm what do they call it? I'm conflicted between what is and what isn't. And right now I think it's better for me not to touch it at all because, the more I try to go get right about it, the more I'm an unhappy person. I'm miserable. I'm hating people who supposedly follow in his path, but then they do twisted things, like family members saying they're into God, but then they're not supporting their family like they're supposed to. There's a lot of hypocrites in that, or pimps that once were pimps and then now they're preachers. I have a problem with that.
Yeah, and to be fair, a lot of this is simply human nature. You're going to find it. You're going to find hypocrites everywhere you go. There's going to be hypocrites within this organization. Your idea that you should just not touch it and leave it alone, I'm not sure I completely agree, but I would say that if dealing with this is causing you discomfort, suffering, annoyance, stop.
Yeah.
Go live your life for the things you enjoy, and if this is a subject that you feel you need to come back and address in greater detail at another time, just make sure that you do it with intellectual honesty. That when you're asking questions, your only goal is to find the truth and not simply to find whatever answer sounds comforting, because that's exactly what those people are doing when they offer up stupid little platitudes like put it in God's hand. They're trying to offer you comfort, but it's hollow comfort.
It's very hollow, yeah.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to ask you guys before you guys hang up
Sure.
was, because there's a very small venue of people like myself. I'm African American. I'm a female, and it's a minority for people like me to say what I'm saying. And I don't have anybody to talk to about this out here where I live. I've tried to talk to other people, and they don't want to talk about it. They want to just do what they do. They want to live godless, but they don't want to touch the issues, But I really feel like there's some people I need to really get this all out. I'm kind of embarrassed about being on the air, because there's so much more I want to say. But is there any kind of thing or number, somebody I can talk to about this more frequently? That way I can really feel where I'm coming from and see if this is what, is this the path I'm going on? Am I going on the right path?
Well, you can email us.
Okay.
So if you
actually, I mentioned a group earlier, Recovering Religionists, and there are others, and there are also local groups. Granted, I wouldn't want to shove you in with an atheist group right off the bat or anything, but there are people that you can actually talk to, and one of the things you can do is email tv@atheist-community.org. It's at the bottom of the screen right now if you're watching the stream.
Yes.
And just make sure you put like NPR or AETV in the subject. And there's a bunch of us that go through the email. If you put a note in the subject that was like, Kim, today's caller or whatever, one of us will get back and get you some links to some organizations that you can talk to. If nothing else, it may, if you're actually willing to just kind of set this aside for a second and get on with your life, you may be looking for a group that has nothing to do with atheism, religion, anything else. Find a group that's related to an activity that you actually enjoy. My girlfriend knits, and so she's been, with some knitting groups, and I crochet, and I've been with crochet groups, but I also have board game groups and card game groups and video game groups, and, maybe if there's some particular interest, sometimes getting away from it, like you were suggesting entirely, is a good way to clear your head.
That's true.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the people that are offering you these silly little platitudes that are pretty meaningless, most of them are just as brainwashed as as I'm sure you were at some point.
Yeah,
You know,
still am, yeah.
I mean, they've been heavily indoctrinated, and I think they mean well. They just don't realize how meaningless those words are.
I'll tell you a secret. I've been in that situation where I'm hearing a problem from somebody, and it's uncomfortable because I have no answer.
That's true.
And my discomfort would, at the time when I was religious, make me offer up those platitudes. It's, you're being challenged, you're being tested, and you just need to put this in God's hands, and I'm sure God has a plan for you, and it'll all work. I've said those things before, and while I meant them sincerely because they were things that I believed, and while I was desperately trying to do the best I could to assist somebody in need, all of my intentions were sincere, I was, in hindsight, lying through my teeth.
Yes, that's
because
true.
I was terrified that I had nothing nice or good to say and nothing productive to offer to that person.
That is so true. I have never seen anybody, I mean, for me, I've supposedly been tested all my life. I have not seen the answer to the test.
Yeah, we'll give you a passing grade. The tests are over. Go out and enjoy your life.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I want to tell you guys are great listeners. That's what made me call you. I feel so, uplifted right now.
Well, good.
Great.
We're glad you called.
I bless you, Kim.
Thank you. I'll be in touch.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Well, I'm glad Kim did not commit suicide.
Yes.
Very happy about that.
The number of kids who are in that position. I mean,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
teenage years, puberty, high school, that's hell already.
yeah.
For a lot of kids, that's too much. When you add in this overbearing religious perspective of some sky daddy who not only is he putting extra pressure on you to do the right thing, but just for kicks, he'll let the devil mess with you,
Yeah, in the form of a parent who's smacking you around for being a kid.
Oh,
you
and
know.
the better you do, the more he's going to mess with
Yeah,
you. Isn't that sweet? Isn't that lovely?
it's wonderful.
God loves you.
But he
All right.
couldn't interfere with the parents' free will.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Boy, that's going to come up a lot.
Oh, I'm sure.
We've had a number of discussions about the problem of evil, or as I've mentioned several times, that I prefer to reterm it as a problem of suffering, particularly unnecessary, grievous suffering. But that's come up, and then the talk at Washington State on Wednesday is going to be about the superior order of secular morality.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be getting hammered by the free will and the perfect worlds and the alternate worlds stuff for weeks. But
Okay.
we'll go on to Craig in New York.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good.
Good,
How you
how
doing,
are you?
Craig?
Good, good. Good to talk to you guys. I've been meaning to call in for a few weeks, but I finally came with what I wanted to talk about, and it was I'm an atheist now, a pretty big evangelical atheist, and I was raised Episcopalian, and I went to this. Basically, it was this reconciliation meeting at St. James Church in New York City, where I used to go to. I wasn't really planning on going and staying, but I ended up doing it. And you guys know who Archbishop Desmond Tutu is, and
Yes.
there's this guy, another person. There were three bishops there, basically. They're all friends. They're talking about how God loves, everyone, and how God wants to make the world perfect, make everyone happy. And basically, I just kept taking notes about how does God let warfare happen? How does God let disease happen? And one of the biggest notes of hypocrisy I heard there was Archbishop Desmond Tutu, a massive church leader, a person who's very well versed in the Bible, basically says, I couldn't believe in a homophobic God. And, I think that's kind of ridiculous because the Bible clearly states that, homosexuality is a sin. And I've been trying to, debate with other Episcopalians about this stuff, and they kind of go, oh, that part of the Bible is not literally true.
Well, I'll say this. The Bible doesn't portray a homophobic God. The God in the Bible is not afraid of gay people. He just hates them and wants them dead. That's not
Yeah.
homophobic.
No, I imagine that's not.
Yeah.
I mean, my problem was that simply, the church that I would go to, for example, my mother, she's not a hardline Episcopalian, but when I would bring up stuff in the Bible that, shows how bad it is and how religion isn't really helping anybody, and how it's like contradicts itself. She would just say, oh, those parts of the Bible aren't literally true. And then I would go, well, then what about the part about Jesus? Why do you believe that's literally true? And she would just go, oh, because it just is.
Yeah.
And it's almost impossible to debate with that kind of stuff. And I was just wondering what you guys would think about how to deal with that.
It's really interesting you bring this up because one of, I guess, as part of my path to reason, I was an Episcopalian for a number of years when I was a kid. And I actually had very positive experiences in the Episcopal Church. The church that I attended lived in a small town, and there were basically two main Episcopal churches. One was sort of like the conservative, old-school Episcopal church, and the other one was like the hip, cool church where all the liberals went.
Yeah.
And so we went to the one where the liberals were. And so I had that same experience where you had this very metaphorical interpretation of what I consider the problematic passages in the Bible. And that's what I got in Sunday school. And so the first time I was confronted with a biblical literalist was with a guy who sounds very much like the previous caller's stepfather or parent who was beating the crap out of her. This guy was a total asshole to his family. He was drunk, he was, whatever. And I think his wife finally gave him an ultimatum that he either cleaned up his act or she was leaving him. And so he found religion. And so I always tell people that the only thing that happened with this guy was he found a more socially acceptable way to oppress his wife and children. And so as a brand new Christian, he's sitting there at the kitchen table one day reading me passages out of the Bible, explaining to me that women were supposed to be subservient to their husbands. And you can imagine how that was going over with me.
Oh, yeah. You never got to worry about it, though.
I know. So anyway, I looked at, at this, and for the first time I actually sat down and started reading the Bible outside of the carefully scripted Sunday school lessons. And as a result of that, I was just horrified. I can remember thinking, holy crap, do these people know this stuff is in here? And I went back to my church, my very liberal Episcopal church, and asked, everybody that I knew, the priest, everybody, and said, what about this? And they were like, oh, well, that's not really supposed to be literal. And so we get down into these discussions about, well, how do you know when to take something literally and when to take something as metaphor? And it really couldn't give me a good answer for that. And so,
because there is no good answer for
right. And so it took me a few more years of kind of working my way through this to realize that they can't give me that answer because there is no answer.
This is the difference that we often see between people will object to when they hear a Christian caller or a theistic caller call into the show. I get emails. We got another one this week, and I got one on Facebook that's like, why do you guys get these people to call in who are terrible? I mean, they can't defend their religion. Why don't you get some real theologians on there, et cetera? Never mind the fact that we've had a preacher sitting right here and a 45-plus minute discussion with, an apologist radio show host. But this is the difference between the average believer and the quote-unquote sophisticated theologians. So when Jen asks them, please give me some method that I can use to tell the difference between which passages I should take literally and which ones I should take figuratively, the average churchgoer in the pew really doesn't have a good answer for that. The sophisticated theologian has what they think is a good answer for that, and that is, the Holy Spirit will guide you. Well, okay, boy, if that's not a fallacious appeal, I've never heard one. So the difference between the person in the pew and the sophisticated theologian is that the theologian's vocabulary is larger and more sophisticated, such that it can obfuscate the fallacies that shine when the average person in the pew spews them forth. That's the only difference.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say that the in debates with just regular theists and then maybe like once or twice with a pastor is when you're talking with a regular churchgoer or whatever, they're much more open to maybe my ideas. But when I'm talking to a much more hard-line theologian, it's almost like it's a difference between like talking to a person or talking to like a brick wall. It's just whatever you say to the hardcore theologian, well, basically they'll just kind of refute you no matter what you say, and it's almost kind of sadly not even worth it.
Well, I just pulled up a passage that I underlined from this paper that Dennett and Lascola did, and it's pretty interesting because it talks about going to seminary for a lot of these guys is almost like entering into this unspoken conspiracy. And in response to learning about higher criticism and how the Bible was actually compiled and everything, this is what they had to say. Whatever their initial response to these unsettling revelations, the cat was out of the bag, and both liberals and literals discerned the need to conceal their knowledge about the history of Christianity from their congregations. So when you're talking to somebody that's been to seminary, it's not that they don't know the answers. They know the answers. They're just not going to tell you what they are. They have. Go ahead.
I watched a documentary. I think it was called the God Who Wasn't There.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it.
Yeah.
We've not only seen it, we've shown it.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, good, because I really liked it because the beginning of it is talking to people outside of, I think it was like Ted Haggard or one of those really big name evangelical Christians, like big mega churches, and they would ask him about like how the Word of God spread, or how what happened in early Christianity, basically like the basic history of Jesus, where does he fit in? And all these people are giving very vague, like, oh, the Holy Spirit helped them spread Christianity answers. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Like what you're just saying is all the educated, like the priests and the bishops, they know that they're like the beginning of Christianity is kind of almost made up. And then the believers, they don't know that at all. And as soon as you tell them that, they're just like, oh, it's totally not true, or that can't, or basically, yeah, they pretty much just say that can't be true.
Well, and I would qualify that and say that it depends on the type of seminary education the ministers had or the theologian has had. So those who didn't have like at least a master's level education, they may not know all this stuff about higher criticism. So they may be spouting stuff that they've just been taught all along. But somebody that's been to, for example, like Princeton or Yale or Harvard, they've been exposed to higher criticism and they know this stuff. So pretty interesting stuff. But what you were talking about before about being guided by the Holy Spirit, it's pretty interesting because there was a paper that was done, it was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, and I can't remember the name of it, but if you email me, I will send you a link to it. But it's basically about how what they did was they put believers in this functional MRI machine, and they asked them questions, a series of questions about what other people believe and what they believe about certain issues. And they deliberately chose controversial issues like abortion and gay marriage and things like that would elicit a pretty strong response. And they noted which areas of the brain lit up. And so when they asked questions about what these individuals believed personally about these issues, a certain area of the brain would light up. And then when they were asked about what other people thought, a different area of the brain would light up. And then they were asked, well, what do you think God thinks about these things? And guess which area of the brain lit up?
The one that lit up when they were talking about what they believed.
Right, exactly. The area of the brain that corresponds to self lights up when they think about what God thinks. So,
now, see, preemptively, I can point out that if I put on my Christian hat, the Christians will just say, that's because God's working through their brain properly.
Yeah.
The funny thing, the dispute to that, this is why I had to bring this up in case some theist at home or Christian at home was thinking that they got different answers for different people, and in all cases, the part that was answering what they thought and what God thought were the same.
Yeah.
So not only do these people conflict, but evidently God conflicts as well.
Yeah.
So,
and that's why your God hates all the same people you do.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, that actually, it kind of like makes sense because at that the thing I was talking about with the three bishops at St. James, the way you would ask questions was you write them down on a piece of paper, and then these two reporters would kind of basically censor them. And my question was, how can these bishops say that God's dream is global reconciliation, like global peace, when there's other church leaders in America, saying that God supports the war? And if that MRI machine is right, I guess it's just everyone just makes God what they think.
Yep.
So as long as whatever you think God is, and you can find it in the Bible or in the Quran, that tells you you're right.
That's about the size of it. Thanks a lot for calling in, Craig. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll shoot you guys an email with my name in, so you can give me the link for that.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Thanks a lot. Have a nice day, guys.
You too.
Thanks, you too.
And right here in Austin, we've got Jacob. Hello?
Hello, Jacob.
See, now this is a shame because Jacob was supposed to be...
Hello?
Are you there, Jacob?
Hello, this is Jacob.
Hi.
Okay.
Yes, I'm a Christian, and I believe very strongly in creationism.
Okay.
Do you know about creationism?
Never heard of it.
Do you want to tell us about what you believe?
You should just go to YouTube and check it out, man.
YouTube and check what out?
Creationism.
Why would I
strongly
go?
believe that the Grand Canyon was created in 5 minutes by a great flood.
You believe that?
Yes.
I don't believe that you believe that.
Yeah.
That's what all creationists believe in.
No, actually, it's not.
No.
And I'm a creationist.
There's a variety of different creationists, and I think you're just a crank caller who's trying to make fun of creationists, and so we'll talk to you later. Creationists make fun of themselves.
Yes.
You don't have to call in and pretend to be dumb or sound dumb. Not all creationists believe the same thing. Not all creationists believe the Grand Canyon was carved out in 5 minutes. Only particularly stupid ones, like Kent Hovind, believe things like that. Yeah, and go to YouTube and find it.
Yeah, really.
You're a crank. Thanks, though. Jose in Irvine, how are you? Thanks for waiting.
Hi, Matt and Jen. It's really nice to talk to you guys. Well, the reason I'm calling is because people are open to the possibility that a God exists, even atheists. And
sure, some of them are.
Yeah. Well, I sort of noticed that even a lot of atheists have to sort of give in to this idea that they have to accept that it's possible.
Depending on the definition of God, I think that's true.
Right. Well, yeah, and no one ever defines what their God is exactly, but I guess it bothers me because to these people, it is clear to them that things like unicorns and dragons are mythological creatures and that they don't exist. So to them, that's very clear. But if you let them know that, for example, to me, it is very obvious that a god or that gods are also mythological creatures and that there's no possible way that...
But see, I don't personally equate those two. For example, I'll grant you that a unicorn is a mythological creature, and I don't believe that unicorns actually exist. But I have to leave the possibility open because, first of all, I'd say that it's vastly more likely that a unicorn exists than any god I've ever heard defined. Yeah. So just because our concept of something is, as far as we can tell, entirely man-made and mythological, doesn't mean that thing doesn't exist. Leaving open the possibility is just a matter of intellectual honesty. It doesn't add any credibility to the claim. If some yahoo comes running in here right now to say, holy crap, there's a unicorn out on the lawn out here, I would hope that somebody here would at least go out and take a look to see maybe what it was or what it wasn't. But that claim, I'm not going to believe that claim simply because I haven't ruled out all possibility of it existing.
But I think that that's taking it too far, because in a very practical, real-life sense, we know, we understand that it's a mythological creature that was created in our minds, and it's really, I guess it's fun to maybe entertain the notion that it's possible, but we shouldn't live that way. We shouldn't think about it that way, because it's only the expression I've heard before is mental masturbation, where it's just sort of fun to imagine that maybe that's possible, but just in a very practical.
But that's not what I'm talking about. I don't say, for example, whether we're talking about unicorns or God, I don't assert that it's absolutely impossible for either of them to exist. It has nothing to do with whether or not it might be fun to think about them. I do not excuse unicorns, fairies, pixies, mermaids, leprechauns, or gods from the absolute certainty category just because I might like to think about them. Well, it's because I'm being intellectually honest, and because that I understand that we can talk about things in two different contexts. One is a matter of practical certainty. I am practically certain that there are no unicorns and leprechauns or gods, but I'm not absolutely certain. And we get ourselves in trouble when we assert absolute certainty on issues like that. All you've done when you do that is provided ammunition to the other party to make the claim, and rightfully, that you are closed-minded, that you are not open to evidence, that you are unwilling to change your mind, and therefore you are a lost cause. That's what you're actually doing when you assert absolute certainties. You don't have to do that. You can still say the God claims, the mermaid claims, the unicorn claims, these are nuts. There is a virtual certainty, a near certainty that these things don't exist. And until you provide evidence to support them, I don't need to waste another moment thinking about them. But when you use the phrase absolute certainty, you've crossed a line over into a new category, and it causes nothing but trouble, which is why for years now I've just flatly rejected absolute certainty as a useful or practical phrase for anything beyond the esoteric, labels, logical absolutes, things like that.
I totally understand what you're saying, and I do agree to a large extent, but I don't even want to leave that crack in the door available for a believer. In my mind, when a person asks me whether I'm an atheist or an agnostic, I just say, I'm an atheist. I don't think there's any possibility that...
But atheist doesn't mean absolute certainty that no gods exist. It doesn't mean... And when you say you don't want to leave that crap in the door... what I was trying to explain to you is that by asserting absolute certainty, you've left crap in the door. By asserting a practical certainty, you haven't. That's the only difference.
I wouldn't use that term, an absolute certainty.
But you did.
I would just say that I understand that mythological creatures are creatures that we created in our mind, and God is one of those creatures. And I more or less would leave it at that.
Well, you've just asserted something. You've just asserted something that you can't prove.
Well, it's not up to me to prove.
Yes, it is.
We know that we create mythological creatures. We have a long history of creating them. So we know that. It's not something that's up for debate. Everyone accepts the fact that we create creatures in our mind.
Yes, but you've made an assertion about a specific... You've made an assertion, you've made a logical fallacy. You have said, because we have created gods and we know that those gods are fictitious, therefore this God that you're talking about is fictitious. And that is a logical fallacy, and that's what I'm trying to point out. I know you're talking about practical reality, and in that area we're actually in agreement. I'm talking about the specifics of the language you use that make the difference between being somebody who is rational, who is making arguments, who is that are not fallacious, that do not shift the burden of proof, and that do not close off conversation. Those are the points that I'm making. When you make this assertion that we've created gods, and therefore this God that somebody else is citing is is man-made, you've made an assertion that has shifted the burden of proof to you, and it's one that you cannot possibly defend. And that's the same reason I avoid absolute certainty.
I see.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about why you seem to need absolute certainty.
Well, I don't think about it as terms of absolute certainty. I think about it in the sense of just a very practical, day-to-day, real-life experience.
But that's
because
not.
I feel that this sort of the comments or the way you're expressing it is more philosophical.
No.
I'm not interested in philosophical. I'm just interested in life today. And
Well, the thing. Let me tell you something. I'm an engineer, and I don't deal with absolute certainties ever as an engineer. And there are just an absolute certainty ever. But for practical purposes, for example, if I design, let's say an airplane, I can't guarantee you that airplane is not going to crash, that the parts on it are not going to fail. What I can do is design it such that my uncertainty about that is very, very low. And I can quantify that. And then I can design a factor of safety into that so that it increases my level of certainty that things will not fail and this thing is not going to crash and kill people. But I can't ever guarantee with 100% certainty about anything. And that's the same thing that happens with anything. And so, do you drive a car?
yes, right.
Okay. And you go into buildings?
Yes, right.
And you drive over bridges?
Yes.
Okay. There is no guarantee that those things aren't going to kill you. But you accept that level of uncertainty and you go about your life without even thinking about it every day. So you deal with uncertainty every day. It's not even something that you even think about too much.
As a matter of just...
So that's true. That's true. But for example, to use the car analogy, we all know that cars were not around 200 years ago. And we have an understanding of when they came about. And I think ideas are similar. We have an understanding of when a particular idea or a certain concept was developed or how it was developed.
But the thing
for
is,
example, again, a unicorn.
No.
We all understand that.
You've missed the point.
That was developed in our head.
No.
You missed the point.
Not only did you miss your point, but now you're going on to assert that we have a good level of knowledge sufficient to talk about the creation of ideas in our history. Do you not realize that this is an area of considerable debate? The history of religion, the creation of the concepts of God. This is a hotly debated topic amongst anthropologists, and you're now saying that your armchair analysis is that we really know when roughly these concepts came in and that therefore they're all made. And you're leading yourself right back to the same fallacy that I pointed out before. As a matter of practical conversation, not only do you not need absolute certainty, which was the big point I was getting to, and the point that Jen made, but I'm fine with saying there are no gods. I say that all the time. It's a colloquialism that I don't object to. But when I say that, I am not saying I am absolutely certain that there are no things called gods or that would qualify as gods under any circumstances. That's not what I'm saying.
Well, what I'm saying is that I'm certain that it is a mythological creature because
then you're wrong.
Because that's how all mythological creatures have come about. There is no.
Boy, you just added circular reasoning on top of that.
Well, let me just say that everywhere we look in the universe, there is no suggestion that mythological creatures or magic exist. Nowhere.
Well,
again, we can get philosophical and say that maybe somewhere there is magic. But I think that's just a philosophical perspective. In a very practical sense, that just doesn't happen. We are not aware of that anywhere.
I agree.
So
I agree,
the
but
notion that it might be real to me just seems a little it just, and I guess the reason why I'm going to this extreme is because people hold on to this very, very small, entertaining notion, and then they just run away with it.
I agree, but it doesn't do any good.
Yeah.
I agree, but it does no good for you to exaggerate the claims, because now you have run the opposite direction at breakneck speed. You don't further any conversation, you don't lead any resolution, and the people who took this slim idea and ran this way, who may need you to say, look, just because we don't necessarily eliminate all possibility doesn't mean that it's likely, doesn't mean that we should run away with it. Now they've lost that opportunity because you want to exaggerate beyond the bounds of logic and commit logical fallacies in the process. If I was a theist and you came to me with those arguments, I would rip them to shred and make you look foolish. It is a poor way to do. You don't have to go that far. And the thing is, you and I are on the same page when we talk about from a practical standpoint. We talk about speaking colloquially. You mentioned before, we've seen no evidence of this magic and there's no good reason to think it's true. That is perfect. That's all you ever need to say, because that is a direct challenge that keeps the burden of proof in their court and does not go so far as to assert an absolute certainty. You've got it all right there. You know exactly what you need to do. You don't need to run as far. You don't run when they're not chasing you.
Matt, you did mention, though, that anthropologists are debating where certain ideas came from.
Sure.
And just from what I see, and I'm not a scholar by any means, but I think that we do have a fairly good idea of where certain ideas first sprouted and how they developed and just became more and more popular.
But that doesn't shed any light on.
We're not in the dark about where certain ideas came from. I guess some more than others, but something like, just any mythological creature, a Greek god, for example.
A dragon.
Yeah, a dragon. We can.
Please tell me how the idea of a dragon came about. Did it come about because somebody spotted a snake and decided to add wings to it? Or did somebody come about because somebody spotted a bird and decided to put it with a reptile? Or maybe a bird was carrying a reptile.
It was a dinosaur.
Or maybe,
It was a dinosaur.
So did this come about as an extrapolation from something that they actually saw? Or was this a fanciful production? And exactly, roughly, give me within 500 years when this concept first appeared. Not when we first have a record of it appearing, but when it first appeared. And demonstrate that it didn't actually arise because there was something that was dragon-like at that time. Can you do that?
Well, I think that archaeologists can pinpoint.
No. The answer to my question is no.
Let me just finish the comment. I mean, when you look at, for example, Latin America, and you see dragon-like creatures in their writings or in their sculptures, you get an idea of when those particular creatures became popular. Or when you look in Asia, you see the same thing. In Europe as well. So you more or less get an idea of when these creatures became popular in those cultures.
Which is relevant to what point anywhere on the planet?
It's relevant because we can see a pattern of people inventing a creature in their mind.
And why is that relevant?
It's relevant because it substantiates the fact that people create these magical things in their head.
But we already knew that. The thing that you're not getting, the one and only answer to the question I asked a minute ago was no, not 45 seconds on we can approximate. The answer was no. You can't, because you have no idea when these concepts first appeared. You may be able to determine the oldest known occurrence of these concepts. Yes, you can judge their popularity in different places, but none of that matters, because you still cannot demonstrate a link between this concept came into awareness and popularity in this area and it's because of X. You cannot demonstrate that because we created a fictional thing A, that anything else that's like A is therefore fictional. You can't do that. That's the point that I was trying to make before. It's a logical fallacy and you're shooting yourself in the foot for trying.
Well, I guess, Matt, the big thing for me is that established a pattern of behavior of creating creatures in our minds.
So what?
And so when someone tells me that I believe in this particular magical creature, until they actually have evidence and they go out and prove that that creature exists, I'm just going to say I believe this is just another one of those creatures that are created in people's heads, and
Which is fine.
Yeah, that's all you have
Which
to
is
say.
fine.
Until they can actually prove it.
Fine.
Fine.
But and I guess I do take it a little step further, because at the same time I'm just saying, you know what? Not only that, but I just think it's ridiculous, and no, there's no way that it exists. I'm not even going to entertain the notion that
And
it
that's
might
where you
exist.
cross the
And
line.
you don't
again.
have to do that. And we
Yeah.
got too cold.
Maybe it's because it really pisses me off that people
Great.
so easily
At least you're
accept
starting to recognize that instead of making
Yeah.
a logical argument, you're making an emotional one. But you're going to do what you need to do. I've tried to explain the fallacies 3 or 4
No,
times
I
now.
agree
But
with you.
but,
I
but
do
that's
take it a step too far.
I got other callers waiting, and we only got like 13 minutes left, so I got to let you go, man.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks.
Jen.
Bye.
We got Joe in Austin. Joe in Austin, are you there? Thanks for waiting.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a question?
Yes. Yes. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, fine.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I was just calling, do y'all believe the God in heaven?
Do we believe what?
Do y'all believe God, that's the God that is in heaven?
We don't believe
no.
in any God or heaven.
Well,
Why don't you turn down the TV, because there's a delay and it's just going to confuse you.
why do y'all don't believe in God?
No.
Because there is a God up in heaven. He created the world.
How do you know this?
It's written in the Bible. He created the earth.
I know what's written in the
Created
Bible.
water.
Yeah. Read the Bible.
Earth and water from heaven.
Yeah, I know what's written in the Bible. My question is, why do you believe it?
Because he gave his only son up for us.
Yeah,
For the
that's
whole
more
world.
more in the Bible. I'm
Yeah.
asking why you believe that.
But he's alive.
Why?
And
Okay.
his son died for our sins, for the whole world.
Yeah, we know it's in the Bible. We're asking you, what evidence do you have that supports this belief?
Because through the only son,
I know the story.
Yeah.
Let me cut this down for you real quick, Joe. I used to be a Southern Baptist and was going to be a preacher. I know the story. I'm asking why you believe it.
Why?
Yes.
And his son, because his son died for me on the...
Goodbye.
Oh.
Goodbye. I know the story. English. Do you speak it? I know the story.
I think
Maybe
that,
maybe I should have paused and said, no, what we mean when we say, why do you believe this, is not, could you say that again? But to actually give the reason.
I think Joe was probably working with the only thing he had.
And that's the case, that's monumentally frustrating.
He's got the Bible. He knows what he learned in Sunday school. That's all he's got.
Well, for those people who are about to write in to say, see, why do you get callers like that on there? Why don't you get real theologians? Let me tell you this. If you've been watching clips of this show on YouTube, you're not seeing the whole thing. You can go to the archive and watch the full episodes. But if you've been watching the episodes and you're a theist and you keep saying, why do they keep letting all the poor callers, and these people they shouldn't be on there to represent their religion. They don't know these guys are clearly afraid to argue with someone who really knows what they're talking about. They're cowards who are afraid to get off your ass. The number is right here. 512-477-2288. We are live on Sundays, normally from 4:30 to 6 p.m. On special occasions like tonight, we're live from 8 to 9:30 p.m. You can email tv@atheist-community.org. If you think that these people are a poor representative of your religion, stand up for Jesus, and call. We don't turn away callers because they're overqualified.
Yeah.
I'm begging, please. We've had preachers on the show. I've had debates with Matt Slick. Ray Comfort won't even answer me anymore. I would love to have a good theistic representative calling the show. The problem is I have yet to find one. I have people emailing you say, why don't you debate, like William Lane Craig? Okay, set it up. I'll debate Craig. Pick a topic. Let's get it going. The problem is that guys like Craig have a list of people who they won't debate. I know because John Loftus is on it.
Yeah.
And I'd pick John Loftus to debate William Lane Craig over me any day and twice on Sunday. Maybe 3 times if we were going for visitation too. If you think that your religion is being poorly represented by callers, call. I'm not mean just to be mean. All we did was try and ask Joe to stop repeating himself and telling us a story that we already knew and actually defend his beliefs. It's not my fault. I didn't call Joe. I didn't send a search party out to find theists who couldn't defend their beliefs. Joe called us, and you're welcome to do it too. We're running low on time, but we've got Edwin in Austin. How are you?
I'm really great, and I really enjoy the show. Look, I've considered myself an agnostic for years, but I'm not convinced that I am. And I was wondering if you could tell me what your theory is of the universe. How did it all come about? I'm familiar with what the astronomers have said about the Big Bang and things like that, but what do you think?
Well, the Big Bang's been confirmed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, confirmed by observation.
Right.
So we know that much.
Yeah, we do. But do we have a destiny here?
I'm confused a little bit, Edwin, because we jumped from how the universe formed to destiny. So we switched directions abruptly.
Yeah.
My position on the formation of the universe is that the Big Bang has been confirmed, and we don't really know anything before then.
Yeah.
And anybody who claims that they do is lying or selling something.
Right, and I understand that. But is in your opinion any reason for us to be here? Is there some does intelligence create the universe, and the universe create intelligence? What the heck's going on in your opinion?
I don't see any reason to believe that what you just said is true.
Well, me either.
I don't.
As far as destiny, I think we create our own destiny.
Well, yeah, that's true.
To some extent.
Individually, each of us work towards certain things that we're convinced is appropriate for us. But is there some larger, all-encompassing reason that we're here? I am familiar with the myth. I know that we had to invent something to take us through the night and the darkness. But what is there?
Well, I'd say right off the bat that I don't see any evidence to support the idea that there's some grand externally imposed plan or design. I don't see any good reason to posit that there would be one in the first place, even absent any evidence. And if there is one, not only am I not aware of it, I don't care. I'm making my own way.
Yeah, well, same here.
Yeah.
But my way is to search for some reason, some knowledge, some all-encompassing destiny for the human race. And if you say there is none, well, I can accept that too.
Let me ask you this, and this is the reason I find this a little confusing, and then I'll let Jen finish up, I promise.
Sure.
If I had an hour left to live,
yeah.
If you had an hour left to live, would you waste it looking for, waste was the wrong word. Would you use that time looking for some grand design or purpose?
Well, no.
Then why waste any of your time that way?
Well, that's a good point.
If there's not a good reason to think that it's likely, to me, I don't want to waste a single valuable second of whatever life I happen to have left on things that... Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't explore and seek out things, but let's focus our energies towards exploring and seeking out things that are likely to be true and likely exist, answers that may possibly be there, instead of
I understand that.
Grand fantasies.
Sure, and I understand that. But my life has been devoted to service. I spent 26 years in the military. My whole life has been devoted to service. My life has been on the line, and I really accepted the fact that I could be gone in a second.
Yeah.
But still, I quit because of what I am and where I've been. I search for answers, and if the answer is that's all there is, if I knew nothing before I got here, then I will know nothing after I'm gone. Is that what you're saying?
That seems to be what the evidence suggests.
Yeah. Okay. Well, believe it or not, I wrote a poem about that years ago, and if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. If that's what you believe, well, that's great. I kind of think that way too, but yet I still have this hope that maybe there is something more. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed your program. It's fantastic.
Thanks a lot, Edwin. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And last caller, because we're almost out of time, we've got another Ed in Austin. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Good.
We're running low on time, so if you can get to it quick, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I got you. Hey, I was watching the Zeitgeist today.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the religious portion of it.
I'm still sorry.
Yeah, that's an hour and a half of your life you'll never get back. So.
That is that is a big steaming pile of unscholarly nonsense.
Okay, what part of it? All of it, or?
Well,
pretty much.
The first third about the religion, and then the rest of it is unscholarly conspiracy theorist nonsense. But anyway, go ahead. Get to your question. I'm sorry.
Well, my son was watching me watch it, and he became sort of intrigued by the religion aspect of it, and he kind of had this look in his face like, man, you know, the religion I've been taught, I've been pretty much being lied to about. And I was just wondering, you know, because he was like, you know, I'm just worried about going to hell, and I'm just wondering, how would you approach a child about that topic in terms of, you know, starting to think with reason and logic instead of thinking with religion?
Where to get the idea there's such a thing as a hell?
Well, from his grandparents, you know.
Well, you tell him don't worry, there's no hell. And there's a couple of books by Dan Barker. How old is he?
11.
He's 11. Okay. Yeah, Dan Barker has a couple of books out. If you go on Amazon, you can search on those. They're probably appropriate for his age right now. And then there's a book that you can pick up called Parenting Beyond Belief. It's written by Dale McGowan. It'll give you some resources to help him and help you.
And I don't have any kids, and my standard advice has been pretty much the same. Focus on teaching them how to think.
Yeah.
And anytime you don't know the answer to something, tell them you don't know, and let's go find out together.
Right.
And if the answer is we can't find out an answer, then there's no justification to believe what anybody else is asserting about it. And on that note, Ed, I appreciate the call, but we got to let you go. We're out of time.
Sure, man.
Thanks to everybody who stayed up late with us this evening. There's a crew. Show thyself. I bet they're not. Oh, they can't. The camera's not working.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to everybody who made the late show work. We'll be back again next Sunday at our regular time from 4:30 to 6, channel 16 on Time Warner and Grande Cable, and streaming live on Ustream. We'll see you then. Take care.